Hello, and welcome to the Tennis Hub. We are live from today's exciting women's tennis match. Stay with us for match highlights, player updates, and all the latest tennis news. When the world number one answered the phone in her hotel room in Stuttgart, she expected to hear the usual conversation before a major tournament. Rankings, practice schedules, match preparation, questions about her own title chances. Instead, the discussion immediately shifted toward someone else. A 20-year-old Filipina. Not a Grand Slam champion. Not a world number one. Not even a top 20 player. Yet somehow, she had become the biggest story in Germany. The voice on the phone described scenes that sounded impossible to believe. Thousands of people flooding the streets around the Porsche Arena. Philippine flags hanging from buildings and wrapped around shoulders. Fans singing, chanting, and waiting for hours outside practice courts just for a glimpse of one player. That player was Alexandra Eala. And according to tournament officials, Stuttgart had never experienced anything remotely like this before. For nearly 50 years, the Porsche Tennis Grand Prix had welcomed some of the greatest names in women's tennis. Legends such as Serena Williams, Maria Sharapova, Martina Navratilova, and Steffi Graf had all competed there. The tournament carried prestige, elegance, and history. But nothing in its long existence had prepared organizers for what happened when Alexandra Eala entered the draw. Days before the tournament officially began, Filipino fans started arriving in Germany from all across Europe. They came from Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, Paris, Rome, London, and Zurich. Others traveled directly from the Philippines. Hotels near the venue quickly filled. Restaurants became crowded with supporters proudly wearing Philippine colors. Outside the Porsche Arena, the atmosphere resembled a football championship more than a tennis tournament. Fans camped overnight near the entrance gates. Entire streets echoed with chants of "Laban Alex." Vendors sold Philippine flags in massive numbers. And the deeper the week progressed, the bigger the crowds became. The Porsche Arena itself could only hold slightly more than 5,000 spectators. Yet reports estimated that nearly 55,000 Filipino supporters traveled to Stuttgart hoping to witness Alexandra Eala compete. Tournament staff were stunned. Security teams struggled to control the crowds around practice sessions. The official ticket website reportedly crashed several times because of overwhelming demand. Long queues stretched around the venue hours before matches even began. The sport had seen popular players before, but this felt different. Because Alexandra Eala's popularity wasn't built entirely on trophies or rankings. It was built on connection. And that connection was becoming impossible to ignore. Even the biggest stars on the WTA Tour began noticing it. Among them was Aryna Sabalenka. Sabalenka had spent years as one of the dominant figures in women's tennis. She understood fame. She understood attention. She understood what it meant to walk into packed arenas with cameras following every movement. But what she witnessed in Stuttgart genuinely surprised her. The noise inside the arena wasn't for the reigning world number one. It was for Alexandra Eala. Videos circulating online showed Philippine flags covering large sections of the stands during Eala's practice sessions. Fans screamed her name every time she appeared. Crowds pressed against barriers, simply hoping for an autograph or a short interaction. One clip spread faster than all the others. Sabalenka, standing quietly near the practice courts, reportedly turned toward members of her team and said, "I've never seen anything like this." Within hours, the video exploded across social media. Because if even the best player in the world looked shocked, then clearly something extraordinary was happening. And the truth was, this phenomenon had been building for months. The tennis world simply hadn't fully understood it yet. Earlier that season at the Australian Open, Alexandra Eala's media attention had already started surprising tournament officials. Her press conference generated enormous online traffic. Smaller courts assigned to her matches became overcrowded so quickly that security staff were forced to stop additional fans from entering. Then came Dubai. Tournament organizers later admitted that ticket demand surged dramatically during Eala's matches. Filipino supporters packed the venue every time she stepped on court. Merchandise connected to Eala sold out repeatedly throughout the tournament. But Miami was the event that changed everything. Entering the tournament as a wild card, Alexandra Eala arrived with relatively little mainstream attention outside hardcore tennis fans. Ranked outside the top 100, she was not expected to challenge the biggest names in the draw. Then she started winning. Suddenly, the sport could no longer ignore her. She defeated experienced opponents with fearless tennis. She played aggressively, stayed calm under pressure, and carried herself with remarkable maturity despite her age. Commentators who barely mentioned her name earlier in the seasons suddenly dedicated entire broadcasts to discussing her future. Former professionals openly debated whether she had already become one of the most exciting attractions in women's tennis. One former player even asked publicly, "Is Alexandra Eala already one of the biggest draws in the sport?" Months earlier, the idea would have sounded ridiculous. Now it felt completely reasonable, because everywhere Alexandra Eala played, something unusual kept happening. People showed up in enormous numbers, not casually, not quietly, passionately, emotionally, loudly, and nowhere was that more visible than among Filipino fans. To understand why, you have to understand what Alexandra Eala represented. At the age of 12, she left the Philippines to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain. She moved far away from her family and entered one of the most demanding tennis environments in the world. The academy was built on discipline, repetition, and relentless work ethic. There were no shortcuts. Every player had to prove themselves every single day. For a young girl from the Philippines, the challenge was enormous. Tennis infrastructure in the Philippines was nowhere near the level found in Europe or the United States. Opportunities were limited. Resources were difficult to access. The pathway to professional tennis was far harder than what many elite juniors experienced elsewhere. Yet Eala embraced the challenge completely. She trained through injuries. She endured homesickness. She suffered difficult losses. And she kept improving. Year after year, she climbed higher. She became one of the best junior players in the world. She captured the junior title at the Australian Open. Then she transitioned into the professional tour and continued rising steadily through the rankings. Top 100, top 50, top 40. Every milestone became national news in the Philippines. And through it all, she remained deeply connected to her roots. She spoke proudly about representing the Philippines. She frequently used Tagalog during interviews. She acknowledged the sacrifices made by Filipino families around the world. Fans didn't see her as distant or untouchable. They saw themselves in her story. That emotional connection became the foundation of what many now call the Eala effect. And in Stuttgart, that effect reached another level entirely. Before Eala even played her first match, supporters lined up for hours at fan engagement events. Some fans reportedly handed her Olympic medals and deeply personal keepsakes to sign. Others broke into tears simply after meeting her. The atmosphere felt less like a normal sporting event and more like a national celebration taking place inside a tennis tournament. One longtime official reportedly admitted the venue felt closer to a Davis Cup atmosphere than a standard WTA event. And perhaps the most remarkable part of the entire story was how calmly Alexandra Eala handled it. Despite the attention, despite the noise, despite the overwhelming expectations, she remained composed, focused, grounded. During interviews in Stuttgart, she explained exactly why the support meant so much to her. "Filipinos are loud and proud," she said with a smile. "And I think that should be celebrated." Those words resonated deeply with supporters around the world, because that was exactly what was happening. Filipinos weren't simply supporting a tennis player. They were celebrating representation, pride, visibility, hope. For many supporters, Alexandra Eala represented proof that someone from the Philippines could stand alongside the biggest names in world tennis. And they wanted the entire world to see it. Eventually, the tournament itself began. Eala's opening round opponent was Leylah Fernandez, a former US Open finalist, and one of the toughest competitors on the WTA Tour. It was a difficult matchup from the beginning. Fernandez used her experience brilliantly. She controlled the rallies, absorbed Eala's aggression, and dictated the pace throughout key moments of the match. Alexandra, fought hard. The crowd supported her relentlessly. But ultimately, Fernandez won in straight sets. Normally, a first-round loss would end the conversation. But somehow, Alexandra Eala remained the biggest story in Stuttgart even after leaving the tournament. Because by that point, her impact had grown beyond wins and losses. Fans stayed in the stands long after the match ended. Supporters continued waving Philippine flags while chanting her name. Videos of the emotional atmosphere spread across every major social media platform. The defeat changed nothing. If anything, it strengthened the movement surrounding her. Because the fans weren't following Alexandra Eala only for victories. They followed her because they believed in her. And perhaps even more importantly, she believed in them. After the match, Eala reflected calmly on the experience. "When I need to focus, I focus," she explained afterward. "Everything comes from the work." That professionalism impressed many inside the tennis world. Because despite the overwhelming attention and pressure, she never appeared consumed by fame. She remained disciplined. And that discipline was exactly what had carried her this far. Meanwhile, Aryna Sabalenka continued observing the phenomenon unfolding around her. As the world number one, Sabalenka understood pressure better than almost anyone. She knew what it meant to carry expectations. She knew how difficult it was to remain mentally strong while millions watched every performance. But what she saw in Stuttgart felt genuinely unique. This wasn't ordinary popularity. This was emotional loyalty on a massive scale. The fans weren't simply cheering for Alexandra Eala. They were carrying her story alongside their own. And perhaps that was why even the biggest stars in tennis seemed fascinated by her eyes. Because it reminded the sport of something powerful. Tennis is not only about rankings, not only about trophies, not only about statistics. Sometimes it is about connection. And Alexandra Eala had created one of the strongest connections the sport had seen in years. By the end of the tournament, conversations across the tennis world had completely shifted. People were no longer asking whether Alexandra Eala belonged on the big stage. Now, they were asking how far she could go. Because if she could inspire this level of devotion before even reaching her prime, then what might happen once she fully established herself among the elite players in the world? The possibilities suddenly felt enormous. And the timing made everything even more exciting. The clay season still awaited. Madrid Open, Italian Open, French Open, bigger stages, bigger crowds, bigger opportunities. Everywhere Alexandra Eala traveled next, the attention only seemed to grow stronger. And through it all, she carried herself with the same quiet determination that first brought her from Manila to Mallorca years earlier. No arrogance, no entitlement, just relentless work and gratitude. That combination made her impossible to ignore. For Filipino supporters, she had already become far more than a tennis player. She represented possibility. For young athletes in the Philippines, she represented proof that dreams once considered unrealistic could actually become real. For overseas Filipino workers watching from different countries around the world, she represented pride. And for the sport of tennis itself, she represented something increasingly valuable, a new generation capable of bringing entirely new audiences into the game. That was the part even Aryna Sabalenka seemed to recognize while watching the scenes unfold in Stuttgart. Because regardless of rankings, Alexandra Eala had already accomplished something extraordinary. She had made millions of people care. Deeply, emotionally, passionately. And in modern sports, that kind of connection is incredibly rare. As the tournament came to an end, one image remained unforgettable. Thousands of Philippine flags waving outside the Porsche Arena. Crowds chanting Laban Alex. And somewhere nearby, the world number one watching it all unfold with genuine disbelief. Because Stuttgart had witnessed something much bigger than a tennis tournament. It had witnessed the arrival of a global movement. And that movement was only just beginning.